month, we've been discussing Nevuah. Now, Nevuah, the Ramchal explained to us, it's only an expression or something. It's the way that the Dveikus to HaKadosh Baruch Hu expresses itself. It means what is, I'm skipping out about 10, 15 pages because it goes into enormous details. But one of the ideas he brings the Chazal that says there was thousands of Nevi'im. There was thousands of Nevi'im, even though what we have written is only a handful, 50, 52, I think. I can't remember the number exactly. So the Ramchal says, why? He says, because a Novi was a person who could connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there were thousands of them that connected. It expressed itself in different ways. It expressed itself maybe that you could have people who understood the Soides HaTorah, says the Ramchal. They understood the secrets of the Torah, which were beyond and the analytical mind. That was also a form of Nevi'us because it was accessing spirituality. Only a very few of them got the Nevi'us in the form of telling them to do a shlichus, telling them to go and say to Klal Yisrael things. But Nevi'us itself is something which is relevant even till today. Even though we don't get to Nevi'us, but we get to, and we're meant to get to, a form of Dveikus and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a connection. This week we're in Sega, so when you're in Sega, you can't sit and learn the Gemara the whole day. So I bought myself a sefer, Bavron ben Rambam, Hamaspek Lo'ivdei Hashem, a beautiful sefer. So I was involved this week. I was trying to learn up Hishtadlus and Bitochen, which are two very difficult issues. In fact, they almost contradict one another. To have Bitochen and HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Zachiyuv to do Hishtadlus. But so he's got a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful perek all about Bitochen, Rabbi Avram ben Rambam. But it's fascinating the way he starts it. He says the three sorts of Bitochen. The top Bitochen was the Nevi'im. What? What's it got to do with a Novi? Where's Bitochen and Nevi'us got to do with another? He says, because what is Bitochen? Bitochen is putting yourself totally in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hands. That's Bitochen. And when you put yourself totally in his hands, you're literally shrugging off the veil of the physical reality around you, because you're actually putting yourself. And he says, Eliyahu sat and waited for the crows to bring him food. That means even though the world doesn't run like that, that's not the way the world runs. And in fact, Rabbi Avram ben Rambam says only Eliyahu could do that. If you sit and do that, you're going to be punished because you're not on that madrega. But he says, but the real pure bitochen is actually giving yourself totally in his hands and not leaving yourself to what nature dictates. It means I'm in your hands and you'll bring me whatever I need. You have to be an enormous madrega for that. But that's the bitochen of the Novi. And he says, and that's why there was Zeichet to Nevi'us. Now, if you wouldn't have read the Ramchal, you wouldn't know what he's talking about. But there was Zeichet to Nevi'us because Nevi'us is only an expression or an outcome of being dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How are you dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The optimum method of being dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu is putting yourself totally in his hands. That was Nevi'us. And then the Ramchal carries on. He says the worst form, he goes from one to the end, from Yakotza Lakotza, the worst form of B'tochen, he says, are those that look extremely religious and talk about God all the time and are very, very, very busy all the time trying to make sure that they know where tomorrow's food's coming from. They talk about God, but they don't believe in him at all. They don't put themselves in his hands at all. They take Hishtadlus to the extreme. He says the extreme that literally koichi vo'itzem yodi is the opposite of bitochen. That means bitochen really. And then the Chazon Ish writes it in his Sefer Emunah v'Bitochen. He says Emunah means the faith that really there's something going on we can't see. It's knowing that there's a God here running it all. Bitochen, he says, is the implication, the physical application of emunah. Emunah and bitochen, emunah is the state of mind, and bitochen is the act. The act of bitochen. That means really, there's a goin, they bring from a goin, that the goin writes that the ikka of our creation was for bitochen. What does that mean? The ikka of our creation was for bitochen. The ikka of our creation was to be dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The way we are dovuk is to put our faith totally in him, not only faith in our mind, but in action also. And therefore, the hardest thing in life is that juggling act, to have bitochen and at the same time to have hishtadlus, and making sure that one doesn't go against the other. And we'll see it's very important for the avodah. That really is what avodah is. We'll see what that is in a minute. But why am I telling you this? There's three lines in the Chazon Ish, where the Chazon Ish says like this: Yesh oid mimidas habitochen, ki al haboiteach, he who is boiteach in Hashem, shoire ruach hakodesh. There lies on him ruach hakodesh. This is what we're talking about. Nevius and ruach hakodesh are the outcome of being dovuk, being totally connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Umislave imoi ruach oiz, and there's a wind, a ruach, which vibes, which literally are moving within him. Hamavasroi, which are telling him, Ki omnom yazreu Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help him. Ukmei she'omar David HaMelech, im tachnu alai mechama lo yiro libi, im tokum alai mechama b'zois ani b'deach. V'ze inyan mitchalef lifi mailas haboteach v'rav koche. He who is boteach in Hashem, he is the person who has the ability to lie within Ruach HaKodesh. Because Nevius and Ruach HaKodesh are really the outcome of one thing, which is Dveikus. And that's the purpose of life. The purpose of all our mitzvahs, the Tariag mitzvahs, is to bring us to be, in the Lashon of the Sforim, to be Lit Karev, to be closer and closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, until you can immerse yourself totally, which that was the madreg of the Nevi'im, who immersed themselves so much that their bitochen was that they didn't need any gashmis at all, and they were zeicha to what? To Nevius. Now, why is that important? Because now you understand how Nevius and Ruach HaKodesh are literally the Hagdoma. It's not just 2 chapters in the middle of the Ramchal. It's the introduction to Chelek Dalet Perek Rishon Bechelkei HaAvoda. It's the introduction to Avoda. Says the Ramchal, Klal HaAvoda. Have you got it? Page 121. Klal HaAvoda mischalek l'shnei chalokim. Ha'echad HaTalmud v'asheni ha'maisa. There's two parts to Avoda. To Avoda HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, we're not talking about mitzvahs, or not all the Tariag mitzvahs. There's a specific part of it which is called Avoda. And Avoda, that means let's look at the Tariag mitzvahs as a bundle together. That means there's the Tariag mitzvahs, but they're all joining together to do what's called Avoda. They're giving me a form of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Avoda has a definite target. There's a reason for the Avoda. And this Avoda splits into two forms. That means we're put on this world to be Oved Hashem, and the Avoda takes two basic forms. One form is HaTalmud, learning. Learning is not just one mitzvah. Learning is one of the two basic forms of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll see in a minute. That means like this. All of the mitzvahs are all working together to bring a certain outcome. All the mitzvahs work together to bring about an outcome. That outcome is brought about by two major factors. One of them is Talmud Torah, and the rest is Avodah. We'll call it, that's why you have Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. It's not because it's a bigger mitzvah, it's because it's the basic foundation of the target we have to get to in life, which is going to explain now. Hamaisa mitchalek le'abo. There's 4 different forms of Maisa Avodah which you have to do. Ha'echot Tmidi, one is one which is continual every minute of every day. That's one form of Avodah. Hasheni Yomi, there's an Avodah which is on a daily, there's a program daily for it. Hashlishi Zmani, the third thing comes it's not daily, it's on specific occasions in our Jewish calendar. Horavi, the fourth form of Avodah, is Mikri. It's not defined by any date. There's no time for it. The time element does not exist. It is called Mikri. He'll talk about them all in detail. Hatmidi. What's this Tmidi we're talking about? The Avodah Tmidis. Hu ma sheyechuyav bo odom tomid. There's certain mitzvahs, the mitzvahs hatmidiyos, which a person's mechuyev to do them continuously, every minute of the day. Kugoin avas Hashem v'yirosei. These are things which need to be within you all the time, on a subconscious level. But on a subconscious level, because you can't be consciously doing something all the time, because you can't do two things together. But on a subconscious level, it's like they say, the psychologists say there's 2 main drives for a person, either hate or love. There's 2 things which drive a person. You can one of the drives is to get something you want, and the second thing is to run away from something you don't want. So one of the drives is love, and another drive is hate. Those are the 2 basic drives which drive a person. If we call it the Jewish body, if we talk in the spiritual person that exists, the Odom HaRuchani, there's also 2 basic drives. Those drives are, as the Rambam says, Avas Hashem v'yirosei. And these are subconscious drives which drive you all the time. But they're not this or that, they're the same thing. Avosoi and Yirosoi are 2 drives which drive you all the time. Now, Yira here, this is important, doesn't mean fear. Because when you love something, you can't fear it. So you can't have a mitzvah tmidis to love Hashem and to fear him at the same time. You don't love something that you're scared of. You can have, at one time you're scared of him, and at another time you love him. But then that wouldn't be mitzvah tmidis. It would be either or, like the love and hate in the psychologists. But here we're talking about mitzvah tmidis of Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. How can they coexist together? So the Balatanya writes that it's a mistranslation. Yiras Hashem doesn't mean fear. Yiras Hashem means awe. Awe. That means you stand when you go to meet a king. It's not fear, it's awe. You stand there feeling so little. You stand there awe. It's called Noira. It's the midah of Noira. When Yankiv Avinu woke up, and after the dream of the Sulam, he says, Man Noira hamokim hazeh. Noira wasn't fear. Man Noira hamokim hazeh. That Yankiv Avinu was talking about was not fear, it was awestruck. Literally awestruck. That's Yiro. Yiro is awestruck. Says the Balatanya, beautiful, says the Balatanya. He says, Avo and Yiro work together. I always give an example. I give an example about a person who opens the front door. She's living in a terraced house. He's living in a terraced house in London, with all the, what they called in England, what they called the council houses, semi-detached. And she comes to the front door the little dump, and there's a knock on the door, and she opens the door, and it's the queen. The example I gave was the queen's mother, but let's say the queen's mother's long. The queen is there by the front door. It's the first thing, you open the door, and you feel completely dumbstruck. You can't talk. That's not from fear. That's from the awe. She's standing there with all her guards around her and the gold carriage behind her. And you stand there and you're just like, Noiro, that's Noiro. And then the second later, what's the feeling which comes from this Noiro? And what does she want from me? If she's willing to come to me, that means she must really care for me. The awe, the splendor, the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when you realize the glory and the splendor and the enormousness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the oneness, and then you understand that he wants me to daven to him, he wants me to come to him, that brings an enormous overpowering of love, a gush of love, which comes because of the awe. The awe is the reason for the Ahava. So Yira and Ava are not either or. Yira and Ava, if it will be fear and love, they couldn't coexist. They will be at two different times. But awe and love exist together, because it's the awe that brings about that enormous feeling of love and hakoras hatoiv HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when the Ramchal says the mitzvah tamidi is mashachuyev bo odam kumein avas Hashem v'yirosoi, he's saying every moment of the day there has to be a subconscious feeling in the man of what? Of avo and yirot together. It's a chiyuv tmidi of every rega, and it coexists in the same moment, because the two things are not opposites. The two things work in tandem together. The yira is mevi li de ahavo. So when we have, if you ever seen an English translation, translating yiras Hashem for fear of the Lord, it is a complete mistake. It's the awe. The awe-inspiring splendor and glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the oneness, as my father says, to think about, he likes astronomy, so you think about the millions of the stars and the billions and billions of galaxies, and you think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, yes, it's you I want. You're davening in your corner. And that's the mitzadecho, the yiro, and mitzasheni, the ava, which come together hand in hand. So just that's b'mikra. That's he's talking about the mitzvah tmidios, who mashiachuyev be'odam tomid k'moed avas Hashem v'yirosei hayomi. What's the mitzvah yomis? What's the mitzvah? Is the avodah which is on a daily basis. Who mashiachuyev be'bechol yoim v'hainu hakorbanos b'zman habayis. The korban tomid shel boker, the korban tomid shel tzorayim, and achshavat tefillah, so krishma, the tefillah and krishma, which are bimkoim, the korbanos, which are chiyuvim on a daily basis. Hazmani, the third form of avodah, which is also time bound, but not on a daily and not on a constant level. Hazmani u'mashichu bizmanim yeduim. That's Shabbos and Yontef. Hamikri, the avodah which is not limited to time. It's things which will come to him out of need. Kegoin chala, hafroshas chala, maisa, pidin abenu kiyotze. These are not mitzvahs which are limited to a time. These mitzvahs are not given to you on a daily basis, or monthly basis, or yearly basis. These are given to you dependent upon actions that you do. Now, this is really, for somebody who's learned, we've learned Ramchal for many, many months, if not years. Now, he constantly gives us a praise. He gives us like a bite. In one bite, the whole of the Jewish life, that the whole of the creation in a bite. So what's our purpose in the world in one bite? Omnom, Ike kol inyonim ela, there are tariag mitzvahs. There are tariag mitzvahs, some daily, some constant, some monthly, some yearly, but what's the avodah? That means they all come together to build a certain avodah for the Odom. What's the avodah? How do you describe in one word the tachlis of avodah? V'omnam ike kol inyonim eilo b'derech klal. Nizboi b'chelek rishon perek revi. I've explained it to you in perek rishon perek revi. Shu hapni'a elav yizborach u'bakoshas kirvosei. It's the turning to him and the desire to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All these things, all the Tariag mitzvahs, that means if I'd ask you, what's the avodah of Adam? Why was he created? He was created to be dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That means to focus his life, even though he's in a world full of gashmis, in a world where he has to be mishtadl in gashmis. His business is gashmis. Everything he does is gashmis. What's his goal of his life? The goal of his life is to channel himself, to focus his being on what? On to be mitkarev HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to make himself closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be constantly poneh, constantly to be focused and turned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, to try as much as he can to be dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now the Tariag mitzvahs, and that's what the Baal Shem Tov said, the Tariag mitzvahs comes all from the Ramchal, even though he lived almost the same time, a bit later. Oh, it was the same time, I think, even. But the Baal Shem Tov, that's what the Baal Shem Tov says always. Tariag mitzvahs or tariag itim. The tariag eitzois. How to be dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a book, like, when you want a cake, so we'll give you exactly a recipe book. How to cook the cake. You want... that means the purpose of the world of your creation was for you to work, to be korev, to near yourself, to bring yourself to a situation that you should be close and close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How do you do this? How do you do this? There's a recipe book. That's Tariag Itim, says the Baal Shem Tov. Tariag Eitz says how to do it. So avodah, what's avodah? The whole avodah is to be mitkarev to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to get closer, to be dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the mocker of all this, and the Baal Shem Tov, is the beginning of the Eitz Chaim of Arizal. Where the beginning of the Eitz Chaim is the one place we talk some philosophy. And it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a halal, and he put in a kav, and he put in the light, and he created a world for people to live in so that they could become dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In those three words, he put down the essence, the raison d'etre, the reason of being that there is to mankind, and that's avodah. And now, that's why I gave you the Agdoma, that Nevius and Ruach HaKodesh are just the highest form of Kirvas Elokim. They are the optimum. You're getting to the optimum levels of Kirvas Elokim. Nevius is the optimum. Nevius Moshe Rabbeinu is something which almost no one can be masig. That's bitul ha. Last week, v'anachnu ma said, nachnu ma, we said last week's parsha, wasn't it? Yes? And nachnu ma says the Chaim Volozhin, Moshe Rabbeinu said, we are nothing. There was a complete that means that he actually managed to comprehend the mirage of the world. Not even to comprehend, he managed to have some sort of hasoga in the fact that the world is a mirage. It's no more than just what HaKadosh Baruch Hu lets us see, but it's all him. Anachnu ma. We are garnished. We are nothing. We're just something which HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows us to exist within the vastness of his own oneness. So Moshe achieved the ultimate dveikus. Aspaklario meiro. He achieved the nevius of the highest level because he achieved dveikus of the highest level. Below that you have the nevius of all the neviim, which wasn't aspaklario meiro, it's aspaklario sheino meiro, but was also spitz dveikus. Then you have the madrega below that, which is ruach hakodesh. But all our avodah is aspiring. All our reason, our raison d'etre, is in order to aspire to some sort, some level of this dveikus. And that is the purpose of avodah. That means now you understand how Nevius and Ruach HaKodesh, which he talks about in such length, is really a Haggadah. It's an introduction to everyday mitzvahs. Everyday mitzvahs has you're looking at mitzvahs in a completely new eyes. You're looking at them not just as Tariag mitzvahs, the 13 ways of what? Of achieving dveikus. And that's why you have some mitzvahs which are needed on a constant, because the way enabled, don't forget, we're living in this world. Never forget, besides Moshe Rabbeinu, who could actually disconnect from this world, we're all living in a world of Gashmias. In the world of Gashmias, to survive it, we have to have a lot of eitzes. The Tariag Itim, it has to be something constant. Something, the mitzvahs tmidios is something we have to have constantly subconscious within us, which is there to fight the mirage of the world. He's walking in the midbar and he sees this stunning oasis, and in the oasis, it's not just, there's vodka. It's not just water that's going there. It's vodka and Diet Cola or Coke, whatever you like. He wants it. You have to fight that mirage. The mitzvahs are our klei milchoma. They are the way we fight the world which pulls us to this mirage. And that's why you need certain mitzvahs which are there the whole time, because you have to have a constant low level of vaccination against the mirage of the world. That vaccination is what? The mitzvahs tmidios. Then we have mitzvahs which are yom yom, which start our day. Don't forget, tefillah starts our day. It prepares us for going to face the world. When you sit in a meeting and you're meeting the bank manager and he's giving you hell, it's very hard to think about the fact this Al Sakodesh Baruch Hu. You know what I mean? It's very, very hard to be boiteach b'Hashem and put yourself in his hands. So we start off the day with tefillah, which is the hachona. It prepares us for the war ahead. It's like the daily dose of vaccination against the Olam HaMaisa we've got to face. And then you have coming to you on Shabbos. Shabbos is a whole day. I'm just giving you the ideas. It's a whole day where you are pointed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it gives you something around the whole week. It's the Sunday and the Thursday and the Friday. It literally overflows to the rest of the week. It's like the oasis in the week where you see the true Kodesh Baruch Hu. You couldn't be dovuk in a Kodesh Baruch Hu without the Olam HaMaisa. There's no business. There's no bank manager. There's nothing, only him. And it overflows to the rest of the week. Then you have Yomim Tovim. 7 days We have a week of it. V'chule, v'chule, v'chule. That means in the eyes of the Ramchal, avoida, what avoida? Avoida is our life's work of attempting to be dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. That's what it is. And there's tariag ways of doing it. But it's called avoida. And avoida is to be mitzkarev to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now you understand, when you turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for tshuva, so says the Mabit, why is it Lashon tshuva? Because besides the fact that you did something against what he told you to do, but you were mitrachek from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Mabit in Beis Elokim, you move further away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and tshuva brings you back. Again, you hear the further away, and it brings you back, because Tariag mitzvahs, the Tariag details, and there's a tzivui of each one, and there's an aseh and lo yisaseh to do them. But he who does an avera, besides the fact that he didn't keep that specific mitzvah, but he was pagan in his avodah, his life's work is to create some sort of closeness between him and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to work to be mitkarev to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That one avera, besides the detail that it did, it created there was a general ripple effect. It moved him away. Now that's far worse than the avera specific that he did. That means it not only was he not Makayim that specific tzivui, but he went against the grain of the purpose of his life in this world. The purpose was to get closer, and he moved away. So what's tshuva against? Tshuva, look at the Lashon Rambam, is to put your path back. It's not just that mitzvah or that avera, the bitul essay or the lo yisaseh over. It's the derech. I have to put myself back on the right path, because the ika avera was the moving away. So the Ramchal, when he's talking now about avoda, he's talking about the general. He's looking at it in the general idea. The life's work of being mitkarev to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that, says the Ramchal in the beginning, splits into two. How do we create closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How do we get close to him? So there are Tariag mitzvahs, and they all work together. They're all part of this recipe to get closer. But you want to make a cake. To make the cake, you have to have flour. And then you have to have flour, and then you have to have water. Flour and water. Now, to give it taste, you have to have chocolate and vanilla. And then you can have chocolate vermicelli on top, and you can have all these things. But there's what? Flour and water. All the other things are needed to bring this cake. But if I'd ask you, what's the cake? It's flour and it's water. These are the two prominent factors which create the kirvas elik, that they create the cake. Now go to the beginning of the Rambam, of the chapter. Klal ha'avoda. The klal of avoda. Now he's not talking about tariag. It is tariag mitzvahs, but the klal of avoda mischalek l'shnei chalokim. Begadol, there's two basic ingredients which are needed for this avoda, for the kirvas elikim. Ho'echod Talmud v'asheni ha'maisa. Talmud is the flour. The other mitzvahs are the water. But the two basic elements in kirvas Elokim is Torah and all the other mitzvahs. That means, now I just want to explain to you, give you understanding what it is. Talmud Torah keneged kulam. what does it mean, Talmud Torah Kneged Kulam? Talmud Torah Kneged Kulam doesn't mean that Kodesh, it's more the tzivui. They're all tzivuim. The tzivuim are all tzivuim. The commandments are all commandments. And they're all commandments, and there's no one commandment and another commandment. So what do we mean Talmud Torah Kneged Kulam? It's one of these things everyone says, and the mashgichim shout it, and the tzaddikim scream it, and no one knows what on earth they're talking about. Says the Ramchal, let's talk about the avodah. That means there's an outcome. There's a target we're trying to get to. All these Tariag mitzvahs are eitzes, drochim, in which to get to Kirvas Elokim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded you to keep all of them. That was in the commandments, in the law book, in the commandments, the Tariag are not one bigger than the other. But then there's another. Let's look at it now in a different aspect. All these tzivuim, what's the toyeles? What's the tachlis? The tachlis is Kirvas Elokim. When you're talking about Kirvas Elokim, Torah is the flour and all the other mitzvahs are water. They're the two basic ingredients to create Kirvas Elokim. There is nothing more and nothing which can compare to the Kirvas Elokim, to the Dveikus in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is created through Torah. So that's how he starts off. He says, okay, we've talked about Nevuah and Ruach HaKodesh, so you understand there's what's the purpose? The purpose is Dveikus. There's Novi, there's Moshe, there's Novi, there's the Ruach, there's Ruach HaKodesh, and all that is through Tariag mitzvahs. The purpose of Tariag mitzvahs is to achieve Dveikus. In Dveikus, there's all these different levels. But even you, little you, even if you're not going to be Zeicher to Ruach HaKodesh, but your toyeles is a form of Kirvas Elokim. And in that aspect, there's only two bases. There's two things which are Ikka, Torah and Maisa. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam is not mipchinat hatzivui. It's not mitzad hatzivui. In the tzivui, there's no difference. It's mitzad the toyeles of Kirvas Elokim. Now look at Dalet. Let's go back to Dalet. V'omnam iki kol inyonim eilo b'derech klal. Nizbor b'chelek rishon perek revi, shu apnio elav yizborach u bakoshas kirvosoi. Kfi adrochim. But how do you get this? This kirva. In the ways in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't leave us in the dark. He gave us a recipe book. He gave us a instruction booklet how to achieve Kirvas Elokim. And that's what? Tariag mitzvahs. Since the purpose is what? The purpose is Kirvas Elokim. That means, what's the purpose of the whole of our existence? To be mitkarev to the spiritual body, to the spiritual being. And that means, what's the biggest danger in this world? What's the biggest danger? The physical world around me. The biggest danger, which is literally what I have to combat in order to achieve Kirvas Elokim, is what? Is the physicality of this world. Those bank managers, that bank manager, those bills that drive you out of your mind. That's the biggest war in this world. That means not, listen to me carefully. Once we've seen a higher aspect, once we've seen the purpose of life, if see those who have never learned the Ramchal, they see Tariag mitzvahs, and they see what's the dangers in a person's life, the things that stop him from what? From doing those Tariag mitzvahs. So mera ve'asei toif. loisase and essay. But when you're already into the Ramchal, and you understand there's Nevius, and there's Ruach HaKodesh, and there's Kirvas Elokim, and the Tariag is just a way to get you there. So what's the biggest danger in the world? Physical existence. Mundane life. The bank manager. The bills. The nicer, the cleaner floor. The danger in life is that which pulls you into physical existence and therefore negates the hasoga of Kirvas Elokim. Kirvas Elokim is the Toyeles. And the danger of the world, look what he writes. Tzorech shenishtadel lahose kol miniyos hara hadavik v'choshech hachormis v'elam hazeh. We have to prevent the evils of the physical world. He's talking about bank managers. He's not talking about pornography. And to try with all our effort to be mitkarev to that spiritual entity. And we literally connect to the shleimus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shezeh kol chefso yizborach. It's unbelievable. In 10 lines, he blows your world up and brings you into a totally new world of Yiddishkeit. Now, again, we're talking about the details of what? Not necessarily Tariag. Because now you've got a whole avodah which exists, which is literally outside of Tariag. It's fighting for the physical world. It's finding ways to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Balatanya is the most wonderful sefer because the Balatanya wrote a sefer which is literally a program, detailed program of emotional experiences to bring towards Kirvas Elokim. It's not asay v'lo yisasay. And from the beginning, he who learns a be'iyun, from the beginning he says, there's something else in Yiddishkeit. I'm not going to tell you about the Tariag, everyone knows about that. But there's an underlying current, an underlying target, an underlying purpose in existence. And I'm going to write to you a Shulchan Aruch, which gives you a program of how to work on Kirvas Elokim. Kirvas Elokim is also something that needs to be written about. Now the Ramchal here is going to talk about the Tariag, but he's going to talk about the Tariag within the concept of Kirvas Elokim. And he's going to put everything on different levels within the context of Kirvas Elokim. The Balatanya wrote a Shulchan Aruch on Kirvas Elokim. Literally, a whole 36 or 38 prokim on how to get there. The first 5 is building you up the fact that there is such a thing. But afterwards, it's mamash, and most of it is meditative experiences or slavos, or all sorts of things to bring you to Ahavot HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all based on the Ramchal. He is the one who brought it out. He is the one who gave us the context of Kirvas Elokim. The details of how to achieve it. The way in which he's got to work towards the work of avodah to achieve this shleimus and to achieve this dveikus, k'fi sidreo v'chol machalekeseo b'shoresh u'barafeo u'nevoya toksos mem hayoyse shayachim v'noigim b'chol mokim b'chol zman. I'm going to explain to you now the basic, he says. We're going to go through the basic mitzvahs which should lead you through your daily experience of avodas Hashem within the context of Kirvas Elokim. Isn't it unbelievable, beautiful? Beautiful. The Beinu Haramchal, it gives you a cheshek within the sega to carry on. Doesn't it? Somehow life, there's something behind everything. It's not just the mundane of life. It makes a difference if you're at home or you're out. It makes a difference if there's people around you, not people around you. There's something else going on here. And you just have to link. And that's why between me and you, I think it's, my kids love reading fantasy and science fiction. And I always say to my wife, it's a great thing because it's the ability to see something else. Because really, in the world of the Ramchal, there's something which we don't see. And that's the reality. There's something, even in the tzivuyim, we know Tariag mitzvahs. Would you dream that there's something behind it? Would you dream that there's another context here and a purpose for existence and that are biggest, you understand? Literally. From now on, you walk into the bank, he's the Sultan. You've met the Sultan. You've met the Choshech. It's that bill that comes in the post every day. And there's something else there. And if we can connect to it, it makes a difference where we live, who we are. You're connected to the real reality. Fine, Aguta.
That's good, Soros. Good night.
Soros Davis. How are you, Uncle Larry?
Hashem.